Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. We're in episode 179. And like last week, we're going to take a little bit of a look at the pre-junior category from the last World Championships in Tampere, Finland. It's a new division for us. It hasn't run before except in the previous World Cup in Koper. And so this is also going to be a division in the European Championships going forward, in the World Championships going forward. So it's something that we have to get used to. So we're having a look at what's going on in that division, what lessons we can learn, and if it stacks up with the kind of things that we've been seeing across the junior and senior divisions in the World Championships and European Championships over the last little while. Today we have Robert Gay from Wales against John Nocton from Ireland, and that's the final of the minus 50 kilos pre-junior male. So maybe we'll just jump right into that, Richie, and have a look at
Let's
what's
go.
happening.
All right, so right off the bat, we can see a similar setup as we did from last week with the pre-juniors. A lot of front leg carries, a little bit more intent, I feel, in this particular fight, and the distance is a little closer, which reflects on that. Because they're that little bit closer, there is a bit more of a threat with that front leg, and there is an intention that if it goes forward an extra step, it could hit you, make contact, and that's something that both guys here are aware of. But still, so far into the match, very testy, no real big intentions to kind of like force their way on the fight. They're both kind of testing each other out, seeing what it's like. And remember, this is a final. But then we see a little bit of a initiation here from Wales to get a little bit of a return from hand. So that's exactly what we are talking about from last week, Adrian. Looking to see the front leg being able to use to set up another follow-on shot. And again, we see another side kick being used well there.
Yeah, and I think that has been just the key difference over the initial minute. Fion's carry tends to have that more utility carry to it, looking like it's not committing to being a side kick, it's not committing to being a turning kick. And on both occasions, Robert was kind of in the more classical side kick chamber, getting inside the leg. And in one case, he pulled the trigger and shot the side kick, and in the other, then he went to hands. We're seeing Fiona's looking to carry into distance so that he can maybe explore the hands or make use of the back leg turning kick. That's definitely a little bit of a distinction between the two of them. But as you said, compared to last week, closer distance and a little bit more threat that when the leg drops, something can be done with it, or if there's a mistake, that the other person is going to be able to do something with it.
Yeah, both guys seem to be a nice initiation there by Wales, and they're the kind
Yeah.
of exchanges where you're going to get returns, and we can see there was a return from that. So that's what you want to do. You want to be able to, for every shot that your opponent is thrown, you want to be getting to 2 or 3 for that amount. So that's very important. But we see both guys are a fan of the back leg turning kick so far in round one, and they're not really utilizing it in terms of the correct distance and the correct timing for it for me. So they
Yeah.
could use it a bit more, with a bit more, I guess, intent behind looking to use it to maybe set up a follow-on shot again, or to see there's one of them. It's just a little bit against fresh air, so that could be something that both of the guys could use a little bit better going forward, I think.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of a tendency up until this point of I go, you go, and we're looking for that to break down. I think we're just about to have a little bit of that here as well. But you can see that little bit more testing and the guys ending up in each other's range again. And it's that, yeah. So this kind of thing where the sidekick has the follow on, where you're predicting the person will move and react in a particular way, and you're actually going to pull the trigger because of that. Still, for me, as I said, a little bit too predictable in terms of the carry drop, and then the other person returns it. But we can see the occasional burst, and Fionn gets a bit of a return on that. But that's 3 seconds of work in 3 minutes that that have gotten probably the biggest return so far. So we'd definitely be looking to see a bit more, a little bit like the last fight, a little bit more willingness to pull the trigger from both guys, and being a bit too cautious maybe.
Yeah, that's it. And look, they're pre-juniors, young kids in the final of a World Championships is a big occasion. Obviously, they're probably looking to both not to lose as opposed to go out there to win, and that is a very different kettle of fish altogether. Good initiation there from Wales to get some momentum, but Fionn was alert to it, and that's something that I think could be a big factor in this particular fight and in the pre-juniors in general. Because these fights are quite close and the scoring is generally lower than what we've seen so far, then it's very important actually for one of them to be able to squeeze a little bit more and to be able to get a return on the warnings and the exits. I think a lot of the pre-juniors let each other off the hook a little bit too early, where they should force that. Again, this is an example right here where he pushes him to the last mat and then stops. So that's something that we should see a little bit more of, I think, and it will actually be able to rack up even more warnings. And I think that will come into the final decisions a bit more in people's favor if they can maximize on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're starting to see though that in these last 30 seconds, the kicks are with a little bit more intent, and it's leaving both guys the opportunity to throw real shots in response to the dropping leg. So they're not giving quite as much ground against that carry, and it's leaving them in a position where they can actually pull the trigger and throw a shot. Uh, Again, a good opportunity there from Robert just getting into the hands, and that seems to have just done it in the last five. So
Yeah.
again, you'd have to give him the credit for stepping through. So we have we have the that little bit of a lean in, gets himself through the front leg. Fionn ends up slightly on the outside, and Robert takes the advantage of going to the hands there. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, really quite
Adrian,
a close one.
obviously we have the luxury of having a little bit of insight with yourself being in the chair here. If we go back maybe 20, 30 seconds of this fight when it was 1-1, what are you thinking here? What are you trying to get message across to your fighter in these moments?
So yeah, we're talking that last very short while when it's 1-1. I'm really looking for Fionn to make sure that he is not giving Robert actions. I don't want Robert to have turns, shall we say. So
Mm,
I would be looking for Fionn to lead it in terms of his movement, his distance relative to Robert. If Robert's getting his front leg up, I want Fionn out of there if he's not going to jump the leg or be the first to hands, and I want him being the first one to initiate into contact. So primarily because when we get to when there's 4 or 5 seconds left, at that point in time, I'd probably be just as happy. Well, look, if he goes for it, he goes for it. That's his call to make in the ring at the
yeah,
time. But I'd probably be just as happy to play for the draw, level the
get
cards,
for
and
the
go
draw.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we look at the game state, then Adrian, maybe like 20 seconds to go, possibly, if we can have a look at that and just kind of get
yeah,
a take on where you are coming from in terms of what you're looking to do in terms of the game state here. What flags are available? What are flags
yeah,
are out of commission, if any at all? And are there warnings at play or anything like that? So we have 20 seconds
yeah.
left here. Fionn
And it was
is
absolutely clear
5-3 up
that
on one.
100%. And it was very clear that Robert couldn't afford the warning. So, that would be something where we would like to be able to create the pressure, but that was only going to come from Fionn having a more central position. Robert wasn't throwing any spins. This wasn't a match where he was going to accidentally overbalance. So it was going to come down to Fionn having, would say, a kick or something that or a carry that Robert would move back off of and then step through. And what Robert has done very well is he's made sure in this last 20 seconds, I would say after this particular exchange, he's made sure in this last 20 seconds that he wasn't going to back up much, or he was willing
Hmm.
to engage the hands and hold his ground and not travel. So from here on in, it's pretty much left to where it's Robert putting the forward pressure, and Fionn is looking to catch him on the drop. Uh, at this point in time, it's maybe necessarily a little bit early, but once this one has come through, I'd have been happy at this point to stay, I
Yeah.
think, and take the draw.
At this moment,
Uh,
I think a draw is the best option
yeah,
for you guys. I
yeah,
think 20 seconds to go. Ideally, you want to be playing for that warning because I think it's probably more
yeah,
valuable on the scoreboard as opposed to a score.
yeah, for sure.
Especially considering we don't know which corners are scoring what. Whereas it's very clear if you get that third warning, the other two flags that were a draw at that
Yeah,
moment in time go to Fionn. And then it's a 3-1. And then it completely changes the flip of the script as well, doesn't it? Because
mm,
now the pressure is on the opponent to come forward and put the pressure on him. And then
yeah,
Fionn had two warnings in the bank as well, which is a big factor, isn't it?
sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's in John's nature. Like he wanted to go and get the win
Of
at
course.
that point, but the time to have that urgency and that initiative is probably 30 seconds into round one, where we can open up the game and see what's going. So I think as we look at that, Fionn needed to be working more to get those scores in bursts, where he got his the maximum return was when he got through, particularly to hands, and he got scores in bursts, finishing with a turning kick. Whereas Robert was doing much better, keeping things on the end of his front leg, keeping the distance a little bit longer, and then waiting for the clash of legs to go his way and going through with hands.
Mm.
So, picked it off very well.
A lot of time people are kind of like they're thinking of that risk at the start of the fight, aren't they? But if you think about it, it's probably better to kind of push it a little bit at the start because at least if you mess it up, you have that luxury of a little bit of time to be able to claw it back and to be able to work back into it. Whereas if you're
Absolutely.
thinking, okay, I'm not going to pull the trigger and I'm going to be very careful here, eventually that actually counteracts on yourself, because when there's a limited time and you do have to pull the trigger, because it's inevitable you're going to have to do it at some
Yeah.
stage, then there's a chance that it's going to be too late. So it's an interesting one. Ideally, we probably want to be able to take those risks a little bit earlier when you have a little bit of backing behind you with the clock.
Let's have a look at the way the shots broke down. And this one was quite interesting because there really is quite an awful lot of action from both guys, but most of it is in that carry. And we can see Robert, huge number, 49.50 front leg carries, not many of them into contact, and less than half of that returning from Fionn, which just tended to mean that uh, there was the testing in, Robert would take the space, testing in, Robert would take the space back. I think big difference between the two guys in terms of the shot selection. Very similar on the number of side kicks thrown and landed. Fionn with quite a few more turning kicks, the occasional other spinning shot or a hook kick, and then Robert being the one that was more effective in terms of his being two hands more often and with a 100% success rate. Was quite a big deal. Fionn, I think, went to hands twice, maybe three times, but twice going forward, once going backwards. And we know you don't get the scores going backwards with hands. It's very, very difficult to do. So,
Yeah, as well, when you see there the 100% success rate on the blitz in the hands from Robert, it's interesting that you don't go to that well again. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
such a short time, 2 minutes. If you're finding success in whatever you do, you should probably go back there until it stops working, because chances are people are going to find it hard to adapt in that short time, especially if
yeah,
they're not too familiar with you. So it gives them an opportunity to be able to get two or three scores for the same thing on the board. And maybe it's not just a technique that's working, but a principle. The idea of him getting to hands is a principle
yeah.
because he's able to close the distance. So maybe that's something that's successful for him. So that's kind of things that you want to be looking at there, and what's success for you, and how can you continue to go back there to get a return again.
So we do have an interesting stat from this one where the number of contacts made by Fionn was higher than Robert, and vice versa with the attempts. So fairly efficient in terms of making shots get into contact. So we'd say good distance control from Fionn. But for the first time, I think in the stats that we've looked at, the person with the higher number of contacts didn't end up with the win. And whether you want to put
That's a
that down
first,
to
yeah.
whether you put it down to the warnings because things were quite close, or that what he got into contact with wasn't as efficient in terms of getting scores returned on the board. Whichever way you want to look at it, it amounts to effectively the same thing. But we have a high enough work rate from the guys in terms of the contact every 9.6 from Robert and every 7.7 from Fionn. And if we go to the how often there is an action between the two guys, it is very, very frequent throughout the match.
Yeah, so like 13 exchanges is probably not as high as we've seen in the senior ranks, but still we can see that both of these guys are quite they're quite in the mode of you go, I go still, like we mentioned, Adrian, and that
Yeah,
allows you to kind of have more of a single shot mind as opposed to getting into exchanges where there's a back and forth. And I think that's one of the things so far for me anyway that I've seen from looking at the pre-juniors that needs to be increased if you want to have a little bit more success, that you need to be able to get into contact first, continue in contact, and then get that last shot as well. Whereas we don't see it as often. It's very much a you go I go situation, and also very much a point fighting mentality most of the time.
yeah. I think maybe I suppose to remind ourselves, we are looking at -50 pre-junior male. The ring is a lot bigger for them than it is for those
Yeah, good point.
those bigger seniors, and it does tend to they don't run out of space as quickly. They're also quite low center of gravity, quite mobile. They move well, but they're not staying in contact as long, and they're not able to sustain the contact or to keep the pressure on as well. So I think that element of looking after you know, building up that appetite for contact, staying in contact, and keeping the pressure on for both guys would be a big advantage as they go forward. Um, some small variations, techniques. Fionn threw in a couple of extras, a back kick, a hook kick, and a reverse turning kick kind of came out there. But I think Robert got his effectiveness from the hands principally, whereas Fionn, I suppose the separator from him was the couple of turning kicks, getting good scores. This one, I had a long think about this one, and the guys were relatively level in terms of the distance control element of it, the ring control, in that both did good things at times, but really failed to actually take advantage of that ring position or the change of distance. Where I think Robert did a very good job of keeping the intensity of the match and the tempo of the match at a point at a level that suited his longer range and leg, and Fionn probably needed to outwork him in terms of the control of the tempo in order to get those broken exchanges where he could, explode into a couple of quick scores. So I think we give the advantage to Robert on that one.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think both of these fighters had the opportunity to take more control of the match overall. I think that's what it comes down to as well. We already mentioned that probably the occasion, final of World Championships, pre-junior, might have got to the guys where they're not too keen on pulling that trigger. But the battle for control was definitely up for grabs. So whoever can take control of that definitely has a bit more of an advantage in the fight.
Yeah, but it still had its exciting moments. And for, obviously for me sitting in the chair, I'd have liked a couple more exciting moments for Fionn in the first round. But very well done to Robert Gay and his coach Neil Ernest from Wales. So, as a first run out in the World Championships, super experience for both guys. And hopefully we'll see them both again in the near future.
Absolutely. All right, so that's the pre-juniors. Again, 2 weeks in a row. See what you guys can pick up from this. If you are a pre-junior, definitely get working on these things we're talking about. It's going to give you that added little bit of spice to your game and maybe get you over the gain line in very important fights. So until the next one, we'll see you then.
Bye now.